I was 39, the first time my husband grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave a bruise. It was over something small. Dinner running late. His shirt not ironed the way he liked. The kind of thing other people would brush off as stress. I remember how my mind immediately started cleaning it up. He is tired. He is under pressure at work. Maybe I really should have started dinner earlier. I heard those excuses in my own head. They sounded like my mother's voice and my grandmother's voice. My name is Lauren. I work as a senior nurse at a rehabilitation clinic in Ohio. I am the eldest daughter, the dependable one, the problem solver. When people fall apart, I stay calm and write reports. On paper, I can see patterns clearly. In my own life, I refuse to see them. My husband Ryan was charming in public. At family dinners, he pulled out my chair and refilled everyone's glass. He joked about how I was the brains of the family. He told people that my hands were steady enough to restart a stopped heart. Everyone admired him. They admired us. Behind closed doors, things were different. His temper grew slowly over the years. At first, it was sarcasm. He teased me in front of his parents and called it humor. Then it became criticism. The way I dressed. The way I laughed. The way I spoke to his mother. His parents adored him. They tolerated me. His mother called me the sensible one with a little smile that felt like a cut. His father only paid attention when it involved money. I never felt like a daughter in that house. I felt like staff. When my own father had a stroke, my life narrowed. I spent my days at the hospital and my nights helping my mother manage therapy at home. I took extra shifts to pay for a better wheelchair and special equipment. Ryan called it my obsession. He told his mother that I had chosen my parents over my marriage. They all acted as if love had a scoreboard. The night everything truly began, I had just come home from a 10-hour shift. My shoes were still damp from cleaning a fall in the shower room. My phone buzzed with a message from my sister asking about our father's medication. I was answering her when Ryan walked in. He asked why dinner was not ready. His voice was calm at first. Then he saw my phone and his face changed. He grabbed my wrist and pulled the phone from my hand. The sudden pressure made my skin burn. I heard my own voice saying his name. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just tired. He squeezed it harder. For a moment, his eyes looked empty. Then he dropped my hand and stepped back. He said that I drove him to this. He said that if I respected him, he would not lose control. Later, I put ice on my wrist and told myself it would not happen again. The next morning, I covered the bruise with makeup before work. As I blended the concealer over my skin, something in my brain finally shifted. In my job, we do intake assessments. We ask about bruises. We ask about falls. We ask about accidents that never quite make sense. I had written the phrase patient minimizes injury more times than I could count. For the first time, I admitted the truth. I was the patient. I was the one minimizing the injury. I did not confront him that day. I did something else. I started a file. It was not a dramatic decision. It was quiet and deliberate. I opened my laptop and created a folder with a simple name. I called it House Records. Inside, I saved a photo of my wrist. I added the date and a short description. At the time, it felt strange. Cold. Clinical. But it was the only language I trusted. Data. Dates. Patterns. I had no idea that file would become my lifeline. I had no idea it would later take apart every lie Ryan tried to build about me. I only knew one thing. I was done making excuses for him in my own head. The violence did not explode all at once. It crept in like mold behind a wall, unseen at first. Then suddenly everywhere. Ryan never hit my face. He was not reckless. He grabbed my arms. He shoved me against door frames. He blocked hallways with his body so I could not pass. He whispered threatening things in a calm voice so no one else could hear. In public, he was thoughtful. At his parents' house, he put his arm around my shoulders and kissed the top of my head. His mother smiled with satisfaction. His father nodded approval like a judge. At home, he criticized the way I chopped vegetables. He told me my laugh was shrill. He commented on my weight every time I reached for dessert. He called me emotional when I tried to talk about anything serious. I kept adding to the file. I noted dates and times. I took discreet photos of new bruises near my ribs and on my thighs. I wrote down his exact words as neutrally as possible. I did not write my feelings. I wrote facts. He told his mother that I had become unstable after my father's stroke. He told his sister that I was obsessed with control. He slept with his phone under his pillow. He changed passwords on our shared accounts. I noticed small financial irregularities. Cash withdrawals that did not match his usual habits. Gas receipts in parts of town where we had no friends. I did not accuse him. I printed everything and placed it in a binder in my locker at work. As his control grew, he changed the rules of the house. He wanted access to all my text messages. When I refused, he sulked for days. He checked the mileage on my car when I visited my parents. I questioned every overtime shift. Then he started a new game. He began to suggest that I was forgetful. He moved items in the kitchen and claimed I had misplaced them. He turned off the stove when I left a pot simmering, and later told me I must have forgotten to light it. He told his family I was exhausted and losing track of things. His mother started asking gentle questions that were not actually gentle. She asked if I was sleeping enough. She asked if the stress of my father's condition was too much. She suggested that some women my age needed to slow down. I could see the story they were building. The unsteady wife. The overwhelmed caregiver. The woman who cries for no reason. I refused to give them tears. I gave them polite smiles instead. I spoke clearly and calmly at every family dinner. I kept my medical terminology precise and my anecdotes light. Underneath that performance, I was terrified. I had seen this pattern in other families at the clinic. It often ended with the victim being labeled unstable. Once that label sticks, people question everything she says. Ryan must have felt the need to raise the stakes. One night he brought home an expensive bracelet for me. He said he wanted to start fresh. He said he was grateful for everything I did for his parents. He said we should forget our fights. The next week, the bracelet went missing. He noticed instantly. He asked where it was. He looked through drawers as if he expected to find it under my socks. Later, his mother called. Her voice was icy. She said that Ryan had always been generous, and that some women did not appreciate what they had. She said a careless wife could make a man feel used. That same night, Ryan found the bracelet. He pulled it from the pocket of my winter coat. It was a coat I had not worn in months. He stood in the hallway holding the bracelet like evidence. He said he was worried about me. He said I was losing things now. He said he had spoken to his friend who knew a good therapist. I stared at the bracelet and felt a cold clarity settle over me. He was not just being cruel. He was building a case. In his version of the future, I would be the unstable one. He would be the patient husband who tried to save me. What he forgot was my job. Nearly every week I filled out assessment forms where family members tried to twist reality. I noticed which words doctors believed. I saw how records protected the vulnerable. So I made another appointment. It was not with his friend's therapist. It was with a counselor through my clinic. One I trusted. Not for medication. Not because I believed his story, but because I knew documentation matters. I told her everything. I gave dates. I shared copies of bruises and bank statements. She listened quietly and took careful notes. At the end of the session, she looked at me with a kind of steady compassion I was used to giving others. She said that what I described matched a pattern of coercive control and emotional abuse. She did not call me unstable. She called me accurate. She suggested a safety plan. She gave me the number of a legal aid office and a domestic violence advocate who specialized in financial abuse. She wrote her own notes for the file. I walked out of that office into the gray afternoon and made a decision. I was no longer only recording damage. I would plan my escape and my revenge at the same time. Ryan worked for a home renovation company. He supervised crews, talked to clients, and loved to show before and after photos on his phone. He liked feeling like the fixer. He hated the idea that anyone could see the cracks in our life. The first crack he tried to show to others was me. He told his parents that I had snapped at him for no reason. He told them that I forgot to pay the electric bill. He told them that I lost a prescription pad at work, which was a lie. His mother repeated those details back to me one evening in her kitchen as she stirred a pot of soup. She acted as if she was concerned. She said she had heard I was under strain and that some wives became unpredictable under pressure. She asked if I had considered cutting my hours at the clinic. I knew exactly what she was doing. If I kept working full-time, I had my own income and independence. If I worked less, I would depend on Ryan and his family. I smiled and told her that my patients needed me and that I had no plans to change my schedule. I did not argue. I did not defend. I knew better than to feed their story. Instead, I added another section to my file. I labeled it third-party reports. Under that heading, I recorded each time someone repeated a distorted version of my behavior. I noted who told them and when. At home, Ryan escalated. He started using words like crazy and unstable when we were alone. He said that I was imagining things. He said that I was paranoid when I asked about missing money. He would pick fights late at night when I was exhausted from work and caregiving for my father. He would corner me in the hallway and talk softly, so the neighbors would not hear. He would tell me that if I kept making things up, he would have to talk to someone about my mental health. I started to notice a pattern in his timing. He pushed hardest when something important was coming up. A promotion review at work. A care meeting with my father's doctor. A family event with his parents. It was as if he wanted me off balance for every moment that mattered. He also grew careless in another way. He started staying out late. He came home smelling of perfume that was not mine. He showered immediately and put his clothes straight into the washing machine. I did not go through his phone. I did not need to. People like Ryan always leave a trail somewhere else. He accidentally left his work tablet on the coffee table one afternoon. I sat down to move it, and the screen woke up. There was an open email from a woman named Haley, one of the administrative assistants at his company. The subject line mentioned a weekend conference. The body of the email was short and professional. but at the bottom I saw a thread of earlier messages. They were playful. They were intimate. They spoke about hotel preferences and room service, like an ongoing game. I did not feel my heart break. That would have required surprise. I felt my mind sharpen. I took out my phone and took photos of the screen from multiple angles. Then I forwarded the email thread to my personal account and deleted the sent record. Now my file had a new section. Affaire Evidence. 2 days later, Ryan announced that he would attend a 3-day training out of town. He said the company insisted he go. He said I should be proud of him. I told him that was wonderful. I asked for the hotel information so I could call if there was an emergency with his parents. He liked how responsible that sounded. He handed me the printed confirmation page with a smug little smile. As soon as he left the house, I scanned the page and texted a copy to the advocate I had met through legal aid. She confirmed what I already suspected. This was not a training event. It was a regular job site in another city, with no conference listed. She suggested that I call the hotel and ask a simple question. I did. I asked if the reservation included 1 guest or 2. The clerk answered without hesitation. 2 guests. Same room. I thanked the clerk and ended the call. My hand did not shake. I added the time and date to my notes. That weekend, I stayed at my parents' house with my sister. I told Ryan I would use the quiet time to help my mother with paperwork. Instead, I sat at the table and went through 3 years of our joint accounts, line by line. I highlighted recurring payments for a storage unit I had never heard of. Small charges from a florist near his office. Transfers that always happened the day after my paycheck cleared. It was like mapping a disease. I was looking for metastasis. I found it. My sister watched me with a mixture of horror and admiration. She asked if I was sure I wanted to know everything. I told her I could not fight a fog. I needed a clear map. By the time Ryan returned from his weekend, I had something he did not expect. I had a calm voice and a plan that did not include begging him to change. The domestic violence advocate helped me shape my plan. She understood that leaving quietly would not be enough for me. I wanted safety. I wanted freedom. I also wanted a clean record that showed who he truly was. She reminded me that courts and police respond to patterns, not single scenes. She told me to keep collecting, but to stay safe while doing it. She suggested small, strategic steps. The first step was my bank account. I opened a separate account in my name only. I directed part of my paycheck there, under the label Retirement Savings Increase. The rest still flowed into the joint account, so he would not notice a sudden change. The second step was the house. Technically, it was in both our names. My parents had given us most of the down payment. Ryan's parents had given us nothing but comments. My mother cried when she heard what was happening. My father, sitting in his wheelchair, squeezed my hand with surprising strength. My mother insisted that she would have done anything to help me leave. She also reminded me that she and my father had kept careful records of their gift for the house. She opened a folder from their home safe. Inside were bank transfer documents and a signed agreement that noted the money as a gift to me, not to both of us. She had insisted on that wording years ago because she trusted my responsibility. At the time, I had rolled my eyes and called her old-fashioned. Now I kissed her cheek and told her she was the wisest person I knew. We brought the file to a lawyer recommended by the advocate. He specialized in financial abuse cases. He studied my binder, my photos, and my spreadsheet of suspicious charges. He told me something that made my shoulders finally drop an inch. He said I had already done half his job. He said that Ryan's attempts to paint me as unstable could be disarmed by the consistency and clarity of my records. We outlined a sequence. I would continue gathering evidence of the affair and the controlling behavior. I would also document every time he threatened to report me as unstable. The lawyer would prepare a petition for a protective order and a divorce filing. But we would hold them. We needed one final scene that would reveal everything at once. We needed witnesses from his own family. Life handed us the opportunity. His parents' 40th wedding anniversary was coming up. They planned a large party at a country club. They wanted speeches. They wanted a video montage. They wanted the appearance of a perfect family. Ryan grew excited about the idea of making a big announcement there. I could see it in the way he talked about fresh starts and new chapters. I recognized the hunger in his eyes when he mentioned how some couples used big events to share life updates. He thought he would own that room. He thought he would stand up in front of everyone and dismantle our marriage in a single charming speech. He imagined me sitting there, stunned and helpless. I encouraged his fantasy. I told him his parents would love a tribute. I suggested that he gather photos from our early years to show how they had supported us. He liked that idea. It kept him busy and distracted. While he organized his slideshow, I met with the advocate and the lawyer again. We planned what would happen that night. I did not want a screaming match. I wanted calm, undeniable facts. I wanted his own words to speak for themselves. The advocate suggested a clever twist. She asked if I could get him to put anything important in writing about my mental state. I said that would not be hard. He loved the role of the concerned husband, so I gave him an opening. I started writing small notes to myself on sticky pads around the house. They were harmless reminders. Pick up prescription for Dad. Call plumber. Check smoke detectors. When he pointed them out and smirked about my memory, I nodded and said, maybe I was more tired than I realized. He seized the chance. He told his mother that he was worried. He began to send me concerned texts that mentioned my supposed forgetfulness. I thanked him in writing for caring. I told him in text that my counselor believed I was under stress from caregiving and marriage strain. I said she had encouraged me to set boundaries around criticism at home. He responded by mocking therapy. He also wrote that I was overreacting and imagining problems. He wrote that I had always been dramatic. He wrote that maybe someone should check my head. Every insult he typed became an exhibit. The week before the anniversary, he made his boldest move. He cornered me in the kitchen with his phone in hand. He said that he had spoken to an acquaintance who knew a doctor. He said that if I did not stop acting paranoid, he would have to arrange a mental health evaluation. I asked what that meant. He said that maybe I needed time in a facility to rest. He said that if I resisted, he would have to tell the truth about how unstable I had become. I asked if he would put his concerns in writing for the doctor, so they would have accurate details. He agreed eagerly. He loved feeling like the reasonable one. That night he wrote a long email to himself with a copy to a new address, he said, belonged to the doctor. He described my supposed forgetfulness and emotional outbursts. He exaggerated, twisted, and invented entire scenes. He typed it in the living room, while I sat with my laptop on the other couch. He did not realize I could see the reflection of his screen in the glass cabinet door opposite us. He did not notice when I quietly took a photo of that reflection. Later, when he went to shower, I used the knowledge from the reflection to guess his new password. He always thought he was clever, but he reused patterns. I accessed his email long enough to forward that message to my own account and to my lawyer. Then I logged out and cleared the recent device list. Now we had the missing piece. He had written his own attempt at a false history. Soon it would be compared to my quiet, consistent record. All that remained was the party. The country club ballroom smelled like polished wood and expensive perfume. Round tables glittered with crystal glasses and gold-trimmed plates. A string quartet played gentle music near the far wall. A slideshow of his parents' life flickered on a large screen. I wore a navy dress that his mother could not criticize. Simple. Elegant. Modest. I pinned my nursing pin at the collar like a small shield. Ryan moved through the room like he owned it. He laughed loudly. He touched shoulders and clinked glasses. He kissed his mother's cheek and hugged his father in front of everyone. His parents basked in the attention. They lifted their arms and told the story of their long marriage. They talked about sacrifice and loyalty. They talked about enduring love. I sat at our table and listened. I watched my sister at a nearby table with my parents. My father's wheelchair sat between my mother and my sister. He looked tired but determined. The domestic violence advocate attended as a guest of a friend who worked at the club. She sat where she could see the entire room. Our lawyer waited nearby in the lobby, ready to step in if anything became unsafe. Everyone expected Ryan to speak after his father. He had hinted at it all week. He had practiced lines in the mirror. He had even joked about how he might make people cry. The master of ceremonies invited him to the microphone. Ryan adjusted his tie and walked forward. He flashed me a look that blended triumph and pity. He began with his parents' love story. He described their first apartment and their sacrifices for their children. The audience laughed at his jokes about his father's stubbornness and his mother's recipes. Then he shifted. He started talking about change. He spoke slowly about how people grow in different directions. He looked at me with a crafted expression of regret. He said he wanted to be honest with everyone. He said that sometimes marriages drift apart. He said that sometimes one partner struggles with stress and begins to act unlike herself. He had not yet said the word divorce, but the air in the room had already changed. I could feel the crowd leaning in. His mother looked worried. His father frowned. I stood up. I did not rush to the microphone. I walked calmly and waited near the edge of the small stage. When he paused for dramatic effect, I stepped closer and raised my hand slightly. He tried to wave me off. He said that we could talk later. I heard the first whispers at the tables. I spoke clearly. I said that I would not interrupt his tribute to his parents, but that I would appreciate the chance to add some context before he tried to narrate my life. His parents' faces snapped toward me. His mother looked outraged. His father looked intrigued. The master of ceremonies hesitated, then offered me a second microphone. The room held its breath. I did not shake. This was not a fight. This was a presentation. I began with gratitude for his parents. I thanked them for inviting my family. I acknowledged their long marriage and the example it had set. Then I turned to the crowd and said something they did not expect. I said that I was a nurse who worked with vulnerable patients and families. I said that I had spent years documenting injuries and patterns. I said that I had learned how easily stories could be twisted when one person had more power than another. I did not list every bruise or every threat. I chose 3 clear examples. I described the bracelet that mysteriously moved from my jewelry box to my winter coat and how that event had been used to question my memory. I described a weekend trip that was supposedly a training, but had been booked for 2 guests in one room. I described an email written about my supposed instability and how it did not match the consistent records from my counselor and my job. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I simply stated facts. People shifted in their chairs. Some looked at Ryan with narrowed eyes. Others stared at their plates. Then I said I had something to show his parents in particular. I looked toward the back where the club's technician stood near the slideshow equipment. He nodded. We had met earlier. I had asked him if it would be possible to show a short video if needed. The slideshow of his parents faded. In its place appeared a simple white screen with black text. At the top it said Selected Records. I had not brought photos of bruises. I refused to turn my pain into spectacle. Instead, the screen showed a timeline with neutral entries. The first slide listed appointments with my counselor, along with her written note that I presented as calm, oriented, and reliable, with no signs of cognitive decline. The date of the first session matched the week after Ryan hurt my wrist. The second slide showed a screenshot of the hotel reservation for 2 guests on the same dates as his so-called training trip. The third slide showed a portion of his own email to the supposed doctor, where he described me as unstable. Underneath each slide was a short line that said corroborated by bank statement or corroborated by clinic record. There was nothing sensational about it. It looked like a presentation at a staff meeting. That was intentional. I wanted it to feel professional, not emotional. The room stayed completely silent. Ryan stood frozen beside me, his hand still wrapped around his microphone. His knuckles were white. I turned to his parents. I said that I loved their son once, and that I had tried to ignore my own fear for too long. I said that I refused to allow him to rewrite the story of my mind. I said that I hoped, for their sake, they would look at the facts instead of the performance. Then I stepped back and handed my microphone to the master of ceremonies. I apologized to the guests for the interruption. I congratulated his parents again on their anniversary. I wished them many more years of health. I did not stay to watch the fallout. That was not my role. My role had been to put truth in the room. I left the ballroom with my head high, the same way I had left my first shift as a nurse years ago, after documenting a difficult case that no one had wanted to admit. Outside in the corridor, I saw our lawyer waiting with a folder in his hand. The advocate stood beside him. Inside that folder were 2 documents. One was the petition for a protective order. The other was the divorce filing. They were already stamped with the court's seal. They simply needed to be served. As the muffled chaos grew louder behind the ballroom doors, I signed where my lawyer pointed. He told me that by the time Ryan came home that night, he would find official papers waiting for him instead of a frightened wife. I did not plan to be there. Part 6. What happened after? I moved into the small guest room at my parents' house that night. My mother had made it ready days earlier. She had fresh sheets on the bed and a small vase of flowers on the nightstand. My father insisted on keeping his door open across the hall so I would feel less alone. The next morning I woke to my phone buzzing nonstop. There were messages from relatives, co-workers, and friends. Some were outraged on my behalf. Some were confused. A few were clearly fishing for gossip. I responded only to the ones who mattered. I told them I was safe. I told them that the rest would unfold in court. Ryan tried to call. He left angry voice messages that swung between rage and pleading. He accused me of humiliating him. He said I had turned his parents against him. He insisted that I had overreacted. I did not answer. I forwarded the messages to my lawyer. By the time he reached our house that afternoon, a process server had already visited. He was served with the protective order and divorce papers, while still in his suit from the night before. He called me from the driveway. I let it go to voicemail. In the days that followed, the story spread through the family. His version changed with each telling. In one version, he painted me as ungrateful. In another, he claimed I had been planning this for years. He told some people I had chosen work over marriage. His parents requested a meeting with my lawyer. I approved it as long as I did not have to be present. They wanted to see the full file. They read my records and the counselor's notes. They saw the bank statements that showed his secret spending. They saw his own messages mocking me and describing plans with another woman. His father, who had always cared only about appearances and money, went quiet for a long time. His mother cried. She did not call me unstable again. The protective order held. Ryan could not come near my workplace or my parents' home. He could not contact me directly, except through his lawyer. The court accepted my records as evidence of a pattern of coercive control. We did not go through a dramatic trial. Most of the negotiations happened in meetings and hearings where our lawyers spoke for us. My documentation sat in neat stacks in front of the judge. Ryan's version of events kept shifting under pressure. When he tried to claim that I had memory problems, my counselor's notes and my work evaluations stood in the way. When he claimed I had been hysterical, his own texts, calling me cold and detached, contradicted him. His own inconsistency became a witness against him. The house became a point of battle for him. He insisted that we sell it and split the profits. My mother's gift records, and the wording that named me as the direct recipient, changed that discussion. The judge reviewed the documents and stated clearly that the house would remain with me. Ryan's lawyer advised him to accept a settlement that focused on his own income and debts. He hated that outcome. He had imagined a future where he walked away with my stability in his hands. The day the divorce was finalized, the judge made a brief statement that surprised me. He said that meticulous records are not a sign of obsession when someone feels unsafe. He said that my documentation had been measured and appropriate. He said that the court appreciated clear facts in a situation clouded by emotion. Afterward, in the hallway, Ryan cornered me for the first time without lawyers present. The order had expired that morning as part of the final agreement. A security officer watched from a distance. Ryan hissed that I had destroyed his life. He said that he would never recover from the embarrassment. He said that no woman would want to date a man whose ex-wife had painted him as an abuser. I looked at him and saw a stranger. The man who had once held my hand at my father's bedside was gone. In his place stood a man trapped by the same control he had tried to use on me. I told him that I had not destroyed anything. I told him that I had only refused to let him destroy me. I told him that truth tends to look like an attack to people who live on lies. He called me heartless. Then he walked away to a car that was registered only in his name and carried a loan he could barely afford. I walked out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. My sister waited by the steps with 2 coffees in her hands. My mother waved from the car. My father had wanted to come, but his therapist had convinced him the trip would be too hard. In the months that followed, life did not suddenly become easy. Trauma does not vanish when papers are signed. I still jumped when doors slammed. I still double-checked locks even in the middle of the day. But there were also new things. I laughed more with my sister. I started attending a support group for women who had survived similar relationships. We shared not only pain, but strategies, victories, and small joys. I renovated the house. It seemed fitting, given Ryan's former job. I hired a crew he had once criticized as too slow. They treated me with straightforward respect. We opened up the kitchen and let in more light. We repainted the walls. We removed the heavy dining table his parents had insisted we take when we first married. I donated it to a shelter that helped families rebuild after crises. I kept working at the clinic, but I changed my focus. I became involved in a program that trained nurses to recognize signs of coercive control and financial abuse. I wrote an internal guide that helped staff know when to ask deeper questions. Sometimes new patients looked at me with the same wary eyes I once saw in the mirror. I could not share my full story at work, but I could offer two things: careful attention and belief. One evening, about a year after the divorce, I received a message from someone I did not expect. It was from Haley, the administrative assistant from Ryan's company. She wrote a short, careful note. She said she had left the company. She said she had heard distorted versions of my story and had finally seen enough of Ryan's behavior to question him. She said she wanted me to know that he was repeating the same patterns with others. She thanked me for creating a record that made it harder for him to hide. She said that my actions had made her pay attention sooner. I sat at my kitchen table, under the new pendant light I had chosen myself, and let that sink in. My file had started as a lifeline for me. It had become something larger. It had turned his own logic against him. One Saturday, my father asked to see the garden. My sister and I wheeled him out onto the patio. He looked at the rosebush my mother had planted when we bought the house. It had grown wild during the years I spent in survival mode. Now it was trimmed and strong. My father cleared his throat and spoke slowly. He said that he wished he had seen the signs earlier. He said that as a man of an older generation, he had believed keeping the peace mattered more than confronting tension. He said he was proud that I had chosen a different path. I realized then that revenge had not been the point. Even though it had tasted satisfying when Ryan faced the consequences of his own actions, the point had been something quieter and stronger. It had been reclaiming my reality. Ryan had tried to make my mind the problem. He had tried to make my memory the issue. He had tried to turn my devotion to family into evidence of weakness. I turned his strategy upside down. I used clear observation, calm records, and steady support to show the truth. I used the same skills I used as a nurse. People sometimes ask how I stayed so calm. They expect a story of sudden bravery. The truth is different. Calm does not mean untouched. I was angry. I was heartbroken. I was deeply tired. But each time I wrote down another detail instead of screaming it, I took a little piece of power back. Each line in that file was a small act of self-respect. Now, when I lock my front door at night, the house feels different. It no longer feels like a stage where I must perform the role of the perfect wife while hiding bruises under long sleeves. It feels like my home. I drink tea at the kitchen table without waiting for footsteps in the hall. I answer my phone without dread. I visit my parents without guilt or interrogation. Sometimes, when the sun sets and the light hits the living room just right, I see a faint shadow on the wall that reminds me of the woman I used to be in that space. She was careful. She was quiet. She thought endurance was the same as love. I do not hate her. I thank her for surviving long enough to gather the facts. Without her steady hands and clear eyes, I would not be who I am now. A woman who walked into a country club full of people and refused to let her abuser define her story. A woman who turned his careful manipulation into a record of his own downfall. A woman who understands now that the smartest logic is not the one that hides pain, but the one that exposes it with clarity. The world still holds unfairness and cruelty. Families still hide secrets behind polite smiles. But in my house, the records are clean. The story is mine.